Yo, what's up, guys? Raptors lose again to the New York Knicks, losing to them 111-95, guys. Getting really sick and tired of watching the Raptors lose to the New York Knicks. 12 straight times the Raptors have lost to the Knicks, 7 straight times on home court, guys. This New York Knicks team just has the Raptors number. I don't know what the hell this team has to do to finally beat this Knicks team. But this team here, man, just continuously has mental lapses on offense, has some mental lapses on defense, and the record continues to get worse against these top 10 teams in the NBA. They're like 4-17 against top 10 teams in the NBA. The Achilles heel of this Raptors team, 31-10 record against teams, under 500. It's incredible to me what a disparity this team has against the worst teams in the NBA compared to the best teams in the NBA. This team here still has a lot of issues to fix, but the Raptors did play really well today in this game, had a valiant effort, but once again, you got to do it for 48 minutes, and the Raptors did not do it for 48 minutes tonight, guys, especially in that fourth quarter. You cannot allow the New York Knicks to go on a 16-2 run in the fourth quarter. That's just unacceptable to me. You go scoreless for 4 bloody minutes, the last 4 to 5 minutes of that fourth quarter, letting the Knicks do what they did to at the end of the game. It's unacceptable to me. I understand this Raptors team is growing and they're learning and they're still very young. But once again, having too many lapses, and they lose another game to this team. It really frustrates the shit out of me, Really solid first quarter for them. The offense was really moving, moving the ball well. Brandon Ingram was absolutely spectacular in that first half with 26 points, guys. It was 9 for 14 from the field there. He was carrying the Raptors offensively. Not too many other guys were doing much offensively other than Scott. You had 10. You had Yak with 5. You had Quickly with 3. RJ with 8. You had Shed with 4 and Mama with 2. So B.I. was carrying majority of the workload with 26 points in the first half there. If it wasn't for him, this game would have been an absolute bloody blowout for the Raptors again, like the last time they met the Knicks. So it's a good thing that Brandon Ingram had his shooting boots on today, because if he didn't, man, oh man, the Raptors would have been in big trouble tonight. But the Knicks, once again, finding ways to break the Raptors down defensively, whether it was driving to the lane, backdoor cuts, kicking it out for a three-pointer, screen and rolls, It didn't matter what the Knicks did offensively. They would find a way to beat the Raptors, and it was really pissing me off at times in this ballgame. Brunson is a great player, of course. You got guys like Towns and OG, of course. Bridges, who scored 30 last time he came to Toronto against us. You had OG with 14 at half. You had Towns with 13, 6, and 5. Brunson had 11 and 6. So those 3 guys there were carrying the workload offensively for the New York Knicks, guys. Then you had some production from Diawara, from Shamet. So those guys were doing some good things as well off the bench, where the Raptors bench was completely non-existent in this ball game in general, guys, to say the least. The Knicks were shooting the ball well. They shot like 72% from the field in the second quarter, like absolutely lights out from the field. 50% from 3. It was like, my God, what are the Raptors doing here defensively to allow the New York Knicks to shoot this high field goal percentage? There were too many times in this game, guys, where I just said to myself, you got to tighten up defensively against these better teams in the NBA. They will make you pay for it. We have seen it so many times this year, and we saw it again tonight with the Knicks game. They shot 68% from the field in total for the half. Raptors shot 50, which is solid, but the Knicks were just shooting the lights out. 50% from 3. We shot 27%. Another big reason why this Raptors team can't get themselves out of deficits, because they cannot shoot the bloody ball. Really frustrating, guys. 92% from free throws, which is good. 100% from the Knicks. That's really solid, of course. Knicks had more rebounds than us. We're better in the paint than us, 34-24, because Karl Anthony Towns, of course, is a threat on the perimeter, can be a threat down low. So he was obviously dragging Jakob out of the paint there, making him come out to the perimeter to defend him, which made the floor open and the lanes open more for the Knicks to drive and make their layups, if not kick it out, like I mentioned there. So the Knicks have a really solid game plan with a guy against Jakob Poeltl, who obviously isn't a great perimeter defender. If you drag him out there, the Raptors defense obviously gets even worse, because you don't have your big man down low protecting the rim, as we saw in tonight's game, of course, guys. But, the Knicks, just really played a great first half. I felt solid game in general, but Raptors did a great job in that third quarter defensively, holding the Knicks down to 19 points in the third quarter. The Raptors clawed it back. They were down by 13 at one point, did a fantastic job finding a way to come back in this game. Cut it down to 2 at one point in the fourth quarter, as we saw, 95-93. And then they had that big run, the Knicks, like I mentioned there at the end of the fourth quarter there, guys. But you had R.J. Barrett, who I thought was really solid in the second half, had 9 points in the fourth quarter. He finished off the game with 20 points. I thought R.J. had a really solid second half. I thought B.I. was really good, but only had, guys, 5 points in the, 5 points in the second half, sorry. So, B.I. was really shut down in the second half. The Knicks did a good job defensively, making them force passes. The Raptors were doing that as well, forcing too many turnovers. They were really forcing the passes at the end of the game. The Raptors taking bad shots, missing some open shots as well. The Knicks locked it down defensively. As soon as Towns came back in the game, when they took out Brandon Ingram at times, the Knicks were able to take advantage of that as well, with B.I. and Scotty both off the floor at times as well. Knicks were able to take advantage as well there. So the Knicks are a great team, guys. Defense travels as well. They're a solid defensive team. And they know how to get it done on offense, against these teams like the Raptors, who struggle against top 5 teams in the NBA. So Scotty didn't have the best game, with 14 points. Brandon finishes off with 31. Yak didn't have the best game, 9 points, 7 rebounds, 13 points for quickly on 4-14 shooting. Not a great game for Emmanuel RJ, like I mentioned, 20 points, 9 of 13 shooting. And then the bench, this is a big issue that I have with this Raptors bench, and a big reason why we struggle against these good teams in the NBA. Good teams in the NBA have guys who come off the bench and are productive. And then we get guys like Shed, who only had 4 points. Jacoby had 0. Mamu had 4. And then Jamison Battle only played 4 minutes with 0. Grady Dick, it didn't play tonight, of course. Then you have, or it didn't barely played at all. Then Lawson, Martin, these guys played garbage seconds, So this Raptors team here really needs to sort out their bench in the offseason, because the Knicks bench was just way better than the Raptors bench. You had Shamit with 12. Robertson only had 2, but you had Diawara with 8. Alvarado with 4. So, you got a decent amount of points. So you got 26 points from the Knicks bench, guys, like compared to the Raptors bench when you only had bloody 8. Like, come on, that's not good enough if you want to beat these teams in the NBA, the top 10 teams in the NBA. And you got to start making your baskets, and, you got to overcome, these teams here. If you go on a bit of a scoreless run there like they did tonight, you can't be forcing things up like they did at the end of the game there, and the Knicks were able to make it difficult for us, and they just have our number, this team. There's just a better team than the Raptors right now, even though the Raptors have made some fantastic strides this season, of course, but it's very frustrating to see how much of a difference the top 10 is compared to the Raptors. This team here still has a lot of work to do defensively at times, has to play a full 48 minutes. They have great quarters, then they have bad quarters, just too much inconsistency with the Raptors against the top 10 teams of the NBA. We all know that they get their business done against the bottom teams, but it's these type of games where you say to yourself, we are still a step behind against the better teams in the NBA. You got the Minnesota Timberwolves coming up next as well. That's not going to be easy. We got to fly out to Minnesota against Ant Edwards. We remember what they did to us not that long ago. They spanked us up pretty good. And Anthony Edwards, who had a quiet first half, ended up finishing off the game with 30 last time, if you guys recall. So Knicks finish off this game shooting 57%. We finish off the game, the Raptors, 46%, 29% from 3. Like I just said, guys, one of the biggest reasons why this team here has difficulties coming back from deficits that they get themselves in, And then look at the Knicks rebounding rise. 51 rebounds compared to our 31. That's what happens when you're able to pull Yak out of the paint there. You don't have a backup big man as well to come in to replace Yak. Obviously, Mom was more of a stretch where you didn't have Colin Murray both start as well, so that obviously hurt the Raptors as well. But the Knicks just dominated in the paint, whether it was driving, kicking out. Many times the Knicks were just way better down low in the post, guys. 7 offensive rebounds compared to our 5. 32 assists compared to our 24. 10 steals for the Knicks from our 8, of course. 4 blocks for the Knicks. We had 15 turnovers compared to the Knicks. 18, 52 points in the paint to 42 for the Knicks. So, like I said, guys, they were the better team down low in the paint. There's 17 fast break points to our 13. And then we had 22 points off turnovers compared to their 17. But it just wasn't enough, guys. Even though the refs did piss me off a few times in this game today, we obviously know the refs are very inconsistent in this game. It's about getting baskets in the hoop there. And as we saw tonight, the Raptors just did not do enough in that fourth quarter, only scoring 13 points in that fourth quarter. It's just not good enough. You know, the Knicks having 24 in that fourth quarter. You know, if the Raptors just had some more buckets, that would have been enough defensively to stop the Knicks. But unfortunately, the Raptors just get too flat too many times in ball games against these top 10 teams in the NBA, guys. Their defense break down too many times as well in games. They got to play consistent 48 minutes. We just have not seen that recently against the top 10 teams in the NBA. The Raptors haven't beaten the Knicks in like 4 years. So, you know, it's getting really tiresome every time seeing the Knicks, it being a guaranteed L for the Raptors, guys. You know, hopefully they play a better game in Minnesota. We obviously know the Raptors are a way better road team than they are on home court, guys. But this disparity with the top 10 teams in the NBA is just, I hope to God next year it gets better for the Raptors and they hopefully shore up some things, bring in some shooters, bring in some depth on the bench because, again, as we saw tonight, the bench let the Raptors down, shooting let them down again, and at points in this game, their defense did let them down. They did battle valiantly in this game, the Raptors, but unfortunately, once again, against a top NBA team, it's just not enough for the Toronto Raptors, guys. But I would love to hear your guys' thoughts and opinions on this game tonight, guys. So if you like this video, subscribe if you guys want to see more content. Go Raptors, go as always, guys. See you guys on the next episode of Raptors Unfiltered. Ciao, guys.